This is the Capitol Rundown.
We are taking another bold step forward to ensure that Michigan law reflects Michigan values. The people spoke loudly last year.
In places where government operates, the people have been bringing violence into those areas.
It's a global challenge that demands global action.
It's all straight ahead. The Capitol Rundown starts now.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Shamir Owens. We start today with transparency in government, beginning in the governor's office. In Michigan, politicians can accept donations into what are called 527 funds or organizations, and they don't have to say who gave them the money. For example, Governor Gretchen Whitmer reported a haul of $13 million into her fund last year. Those funds are to be used for expenses connected to the office. The governor is just one of many politicians and lawmakers in state government who use these funds. But a Democratic state senator is working across the aisle to push for legislation that could change that.
I think sunshine is the best disinfectant to ethics breaches, to rumors, to innuendos, and I would not feel comfortable having this type of account, and I don't.
State Senator Moss earlier this month sponsored bipartisan legislation that would force disclosures of financial assets and income above certain levels. He tells our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic that in the new year, he and others will push for more legislation to increase transparency when it comes to these funds. Staying with the governor, she signed a number of bills this week, including one that makes changes to how reproductive health care is regulated in Michigan. These laws repeal previous laws that require physicians to screen for signs of coercion before an abortion and remove penalties for prescribing abortion medication. It also removed a number of building code requirements for abortion clinics. These changes go into effect in February.
Taking another bold step forward to ensure that Michigan law reflects Michigan values. The people spoke loudly last year. We in Michigan are making sure that our healthcare providers and patients have every option available.
Whitmer also signed legislation preventing people with domestic abuse misdemeanors from owning guns. The charges must involve an intimate partner, someone who has had a child with the person convicted, or they are the victim's parent or guardians. Coming up, when state lawmakers and others enter the Michigan Capitol building from now on, they'll come face to face with new AI technology. We'll have the details on the latest security measures in place in Lansing when the rundown returns. Welcome back. New safety systems are now in place at the state capitol. Cameras can now detect guns using artificial intelligence and alert authorities to potential threats. The Rundown's Nate Salazar has the details.
Michigan is now the first state in the country with a Capitol building that uses AI to crack down on firearms. The new technology would use existing surveillance cameras coupled with a program called Zero Eyes to detect guns anywhere on Capitol grounds.
Michigan has been very open to this technology, very early adopters of gun detection solutions.
Sam Alaimo, co-founder of Zero Eyes, says the program has been trained to only detect firearms and then send an alert to security personnel, including the type of gun, location, and visual description of the individual.
From the moment the gun is seen in front of the camera to the moment the client gets their hands on the alert is about 3 to 5 seconds.
Police then decide if it's a potential threat. The same system is currently being used at Oxford High School and multiple other schools in Michigan. It's the next step in security for the State Capitol Commission, who has already installed metal detectors in August and banned both open and concealed firearm carry in the Capitol.
In places where government operates, the people have been bringing violence into those areas, and we want to make sure that people who come here to visit here, work here, to legislate here are safe while they're in the building.
According to the commission, unlike the metal detectors, this security will be protection you don't even see.
Hopefully when people come here to visit, they won't even notice that we have all this, and hopefully they'll never have to know.
You don't see bulletproof glass, you don't see barbed wire. We're in the cameras that are already there, but we're watching for that gun.
Speaking of the Capitol, the State House needs 2 more representatives, and Governor Whitmer has now called for a special election to fill those seats. 2 Democratic state representatives, Lori Stone and Kevin Coleman, were elected this month to become mayors of Warren and Westland, respectively. That leaves their seats open. It's up to the governor to call for the special election to replace them. In a statement, she designated January 30th as the primary election date, and the general election will be April 16th. A recent addition to the field of Republican candidates for Michigan's next U.S. Senator is Dr. Benson Samuel. The Sault Ste. Marie-based physician talked to the Rundown's Jorma Duran about his background.
Joining me now is Benson Samuel. He's running for what will be the open U.S. Senate seat representing Michigan once Debbie Stabenow retires. And thank you so much for talking with us today. I would argue I want to start with getting to know you a little bit because our viewers, probably a good portion of them, have never heard of you before. So what is your background?
Thank you, first of all, for having me on your show. My background is I migrated to the United States in the late teens. I grew up in Connecticut. Okay. Went to University of Connecticut, went on to become a physician. Okay. Currently, I'm practicing in Michigan, in Upper Peninsula. My background, by faith, I'm a Christian. Both my parents were preachers. And I'm a Republican, of course. Decided I'm going to run for the U.S. Senate.
And why is that? Why run for the U.S. Senate?
So this whole thing started, I always wanted to enter politics, but, the usual question of people, why are you doing it? I mean, aren't there so many other things to do? If every one of us that actually has a passion to serve people sat on the sidelines, where will this country go?
Why such a lofty political campaign, though, with the U.S. Senate seat, not mayor or county commissioner or something like that?
So, I spent a lot of time studying, and I realized that the policies that I want to enforce is not a local. It's going to benefit the American people, period. It's going to affect their education, their healthcare, the small business owners, the farmers of the United States. These are the people I want to reach, and I cannot be restricting my passion to just one little town. So if I'm going to give it a shot, I'm going to give it a shot, and I'm going to try, to stand up for the things I believe in. And I'm a man of faith, and so if it's God's will, it's going to happen. And if it's so, then I can do what needs to be done for the American people.
Coming up, Dr. Samuel explains what his priorities will be if he's elected. He and Jorma will discuss health, education, and more in the second part of our interview. That and much more is coming up next. Welcome back. In the second part of our interview with Republican primary Senate candidate Dr. Benson Samuel, he talks about what his priorities in office will be if he's elected.
So what are your top priorities?
My top priorities are this, I believe in American education. Anybody with a GPA of 3.0 and above in the United States, a citizen or a legal resident, should not be paying tuition fees. We should not be worried about working 3 jobs and trying to make ends meet while going to school. That leads to burnout. That's a poor quality of life for American students. And if that's what we are promising the future of America, that's a bad idea. So the reason behind why I'm so stressful about this education is when I was in my undergrad at Connecticut, I couldn't afford the fees they put on me. My GPA was more than 3.0, but I couldn't afford, so I lived in a homeless shelter, you see. And that's how I went to school. And so I know what American students are going through. They're struggling with student debt. And for what? To work in our country and to pay our taxes? We are taxing them in education, we are taxing them at work. When do they get a break? So I believe in equity in education. If you're willing to study and play your role as a good student, then we should be helping them. My second stand is for American small businesses and infrastructures. So we should focus on American manufacturing, promote American infrastructure workers. Who do I mean by that? Plumbers, welders, electricians. Without them, this country won't survive, but we don't appreciate them. So we should give them tax benefits, tax credits in the end. We should come up with a number.
You're a physician.
Yes.
What is your opinion about universal health care or the Affordable Care Act?
The Affordable Care Act is a step in the positive direction because, again, the number of Americans that are without insurance with Affordable Health Care Act is 35 to 40 million. That's with that policy. Can you imagine what the population number uninsured would be without it?
Right.
So one of the key things is, I'll give you a good example, right?
Well, but do you support universal health care or anything to that respect?
I would say that the government has to meet halfway, where everybody gets basic health coverage, where if they want to go up a notch, they can pay extra to buy in.
You say you're a Republican, but a lot of your plans, a lot of your ideas are moderate, if I'm putting it lightly. You sound almost like you're a Democrat sometimes with some of the things. Does that maybe a good thing?
So I am a conservative, and I am a Republican, but I see reality for what it is. And the reality is we need to work together, put aside our differences, and let's see what can help American people have a better quality of life, better education, better health care, better industries and growth. So that's what I'm about.
Well, I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Next on the Rundown, our Capitol correspondent Tim Skubic will be here to bring you the inside story on Michigan politics this week, including what new poll results say about who Michigan voters prefer, Joe Biden or Donald Trump. That and a lot more when the Rundown returns. New poll numbers show that while Joe Biden carried Michigan in 2020, he may be facing an uphill battle in 2024. In the latest Epic MRA poll results, former President Donald Trump is ahead of Biden with 46%. Biden is ahead in Detroit and Wayne County, but Trump leads in Macomb and Oakland counties. While Trump leads with males, the candidates are tied on the female vote. Tim talked to the Rundown's Kiera Lake about those poll numbers as well as the latest on the race for Michigan's soon-to-be open U.S. Senate seat.
One person who can get us caught up on everything Michigan politics, and that is Tim Skubic. Tim, thank you so much for joining us. And more than one poll now suggests President Biden's chances at re-election, at least among Michigan voters, are in trouble. So can you tell us what's behind these numbers?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, if Joe Biden was having Thanksgiving dinner in Michigan, he'd be sitting around a table and there would not be many drumsticks in this poll for him to chew on. This is not the kind of data that you want to look at it because it is suggesting that there is a problem. The interesting thing about this, if there's one sort of ray of sunshine on the dining room table for the Biden family, it's this. 44% of the people in this survey said if Donald Trump is convicted and maybe even in the slammer, they would consider not voting for him. So I guess if you're looking for a silver lining, that would be one of them, depending on your opponent, whether he's convicted of a crime or not. There's plenty of time for Mr. Biden to get his act together, but this is troubling information and not the kind of stuff you want to hear.
And staying with elections, the race to see who will take over for the retiring Senator Debbie Stabenow is getting crowded. So where does it stand right now?
This is really becoming an interesting race. We have Mark Rogers, who is very familiar name in this area, not so much in the rest of the state. We have Peter Meijer, who the name Meijer is obviously very, very familiar in this area, but people don't know who he is. You got James Craig, the former Detroit police chief down in Detroit. All three of these gentlemen are in the front tier of candidates running to replace Debbie Stabenow, but first they need to get the Republican nomination at a primary election that will lead us up into 2024. Mr. Craig has his fingers and toes crossed that Donald Trump somewhere along the line will bless his candidacy. He is the more Trumpier of the three, if you'll use that term. Mr. Meijer voted to impeach the president, which means he's not getting a Christmas card this year. Mike Rogers had said disparaging thing about Mr. Trump. And so those two gentlemen are fighting out for the same sort of chunk of voters. On the other side, plenty of Democrats are looking at this as well. Alyssa Slotkin, who used to be the congressperson from this area, it still is considered to be the front runner in that race, but others are nipping at her heels as well.
All right, Tim. Well, as always, thanks so much for joining us.
And coming up next, President Biden announced a new initiative on Tuesday. He's calling for Congress for money to fight the synthetic drug epidemic in America. Stay tuned. The White House says it is accelerating its efforts to crack down on fentanyl. President Biden called it an urgent issue facing Americans. Our Washington correspondent Rashad Hudson has more.
Tuesday, President Biden met with members of his cabinet to discuss ways to crack down on the flow of fentanyl into the U.S.
Too many are going to face looking at an empty chair for the first time at Thanksgiving. So many people have died.
The meeting follows last week's announcement that China is also agreeing to curb the deadly drug. Mexico's president also pledged to work side by side with the U.S.
It's a global challenge that demands global action.
Last year, more than 100,000 people died from drug overdoses, and many of them involved fentanyl or similar synthetic drugs.
It really is an American tragedy.
China says it will tell companies to stop shipments of the chemicals used to make the drug to Latin American countries, something the White House calls a step in the right direction.
This agreement will save lives, will save American lives, and President Xi said he was committed to helping with that.
Dr. Rahul Gupta, Director of National Drug Control Policy, says over 100 nations are working together to tackle this challenge.
All of the countries do have to unite to make sure that we're doing everything in our power to reduce and eliminate the threat of synthetic drugs like fentanyl, like methamphetamine.
President Biden is calling on Congress to pass his budget requests that includes funding for more programs to crack down on the flow of fentanyl into the country. Reporting in Washington, Rashad Hudson.
Finally today, if you had Thanksgiving dinner on Thursday, one turkey wasn't on your table. Dolly Parton was pardoned by the governor on Wednesday. There was a statewide contest to determine the name of the bird. Jay Kozlowski of West Bloomfield won, and on Wednesday, Dolly made her debut.
With the power vested in me by the Michigan Constitution, I hereby pardon Dolly Parton, and we release you to the custody of the Michigan Humane.
This is the second turkey pardon under Governor Whitmer. Last year, she gave a reprieve to Mitch E. Gander. And if you're interested in getting more political news from Michigan and Washington, we've got just the thing. You can sign up for our Capitol Rundown newsletter. It's just one email each week, and you can get it by pointing your cell phone camera at the screen right now. It will take you to the sign up page, or you can head to WLNS.com/newsletters. And that's our show for this week. Thanks for watching the Capitol Rundown.